Today, my guest is a tour de force when it comes to pushing through challenges. Bex Walker is the founder of Bexfast, a vegan breakfast pot made with all natural ingredients and no nasties, and I can attest to the fact that these are delicious. I have to admit that I ate my whole order in one day. Oops. Her journey to creating her brand is incredible, and you'll want to listen right to the end because she is absolutely captivating. This episode is a little longer than most, but if you're already a fan of Bex's, then I know you'll be listening right to the end. And if you listen right to the end, I know you'll become a big fan of Bex's. And you'll probably go order a box of her pots too. As a quick note, we recorded this while the UK was still in full lockdown, but she's now back up and running. So if you want to get those pots, go make an order. So stay tuned for the rest of this episode to hear Bex's incredible story. One of the smallest decisions we make as business owners and consumers could have a lasting impact in the world. This is what we question here at the Business of Universal Kindness podcast. If you're curious about living more naturally by choosing products that are kind to humans, the planet, and the creatures that we share it with, then keep listening. And if you're operating a business that creates these types of products, then pull up a chair because we're about to find out what it takes to build a company that makes money and does some good in the world too. I'm your host, Sarah Henson, email strategist to mission-driven e-commerce companies. Join me on this journey as we explore what it means to take radical responsibility for our choices while also making an impact that can change the world. Because universal kindness is everybody's business. Okay, Bex, thanks so much for joining me on the podcast today. How are you?
I'm really good, thank you. Thank you so much for having me as well. It's something I've been looking forward to all week. So.
Oh, brilliant. I'm so excited to speak to you because when I first had the idea to do this podcast, I knew I wanted to speak to you because I followed your journey on Instagram and your presence on Instagram. It's been incredible watching, you go through a lot of challenges and everything with your business. So let's kick off with a question that I ask all my guests.
Okay.
What did you want to be when you were a kid?
I always wanted to be a singer. From I think probably about maybe 6, I wanted to sing and I wanted to write songs, and that was the only thing I thought I was going to do until I found out I was pregnant. So
I have seen a few posts of yours about this. This is part of your life prior to having your little girl, who's not so
yeah.
little anymore.
No.
Um, Tell us a bit more about your life as a singer and what you did because you did quite a bit of traveling, didn't you?
Yeah, well, I did. Yeah, I did some. Well, I just kind of always knew that it was like my passion, and I love writing songs. And I kind of fell into like the live music scene in London when I was like quite young, so maybe like 16. And I'd started recording. I went to college and did a BTech diploma in music, and it just kind of fueled that passion for me. But I was, because I loved it so much and I was quite good at it, I kind of naturally found like producers that wanted to work with me, and then it just kind of built and built and built. And then I started traveling with it when I was I think I was about 18 or 19 the first time I went to America with like a group of like a collective. The group that I used to do kind of like my Sunday standard, like we had this group called Organic, and it was like a live band, and we would play our own songs and loads of people come and watch, and it was such a great vibe. It was just like the highlight of my week all the time. And yeah, we went as a collective to Atlanta, and we met a few different people, sat in on a few meetings with like heads of like the royalty collection agency out there, and then we recorded in Jagged Edge's studio, and
Wow.
yeah, we did like loads of different bits. But I loved it so much, and I think the next year I got some money that my mum and dad had saved for me, and I kind of just blew it all on going back on my own, and there was no plan. There was like, I barely even knew who I was meeting at the airport on the other side. It was like, when you're young and carefree and it seems like
Oh
a
yes.
really good idea, but I'm sure my mum was absolutely terrified. And there are so many funny stories, but that's like a whole podcast in itself. But we'll talk about it sometime. But yeah, and then I just kind of met people while I was out there, and I was still obviously recording in London when I was like home as well. And I met someone in Atlanta, and they were like, I really want you to come back and record. Like, we'll fly you out. And so I kind of started living between London and Atlanta, and just kind of doing a few months there, and then coming home for 6 months and doing a few months there. recording, but nothing really came out of that other than the experience and the confidence that I got from doing that. But I had also, when I'd been home, I'd started recording some house music, and the first track got signed and was put on one of the Ministry of Sound compilation CDs. And then I wrote
Whoa.
another one that got signed by Defected, and then I wrote another one that got signed by Head Candy. So it was all kind of just starting to happen. So at that point I was like, okay, everything's happening at home, let me just go back and start focusing on that. And then the last time that I was in Atlanta, I'd met my husband on Facebook. He's a musician as well. He's from London as well. And we had loads of mutual friends, but he was in LA doing the same thing. And so we just kind of like really hit it off. And then when I came home, we were just kind of together all the time. I still did loads of shows in London and whatever, but like a year later, I found out I was pregnant, and it was really difficult because the week that I found out I was pregnant, I got offered a deal with Defected and a deal with Head Candy, and I was like, oh my gosh, like, it's almost like you've just been handed everything you've worked your life
Yeah.
for, and then yeah, but I knew that I couldn't do both. I did try for a while, but obviously at that point the music industry wasn't as progressive as it is now, where you could be anyone singing anything. It was very much about how you looked and whatever, and being like pregnant and whatever, it just wasn't really what they were looking for, I don't think. And I knew that I didn't want to sign the deals not knowing, like, obviously I'd never been through pregnancy before, I'd never been a mum before, and I was only like 23, so I didn't want to sign the deals and then have this burden of like having to come through with like a body of work and not
Mm.
knowing whether I'd be able to do that. And then I thought, actually, that might sabotage my future, if I want to go back to doing it after I've had Tyler and whatever. And I did get back to recording after I'd had her, but it just wasn't the same, and I was away from her for like hours and hours and hours, because studio sessions, I mean, you could be in a session for like 10 hours and come out and you'd be like, this isn't really working, or whatever. Or you can be in there for 5 minutes and you've written the whole song. It's just so unpredictable. And I just kind of, I just yeah I just didn't feel the need. I guess it was like it fulfilled a side of me doing music, like, that I hadn't got from anywhere else. And then when I had a child, it was like, well, that actually fulfilled me a whole lot more. So
Mm.
after a few months of like recording still, I just kind of decided to step away from it for a while. And it was really difficult because my husband, we weren't married at the time, but he was away on tour from when she was like 3 days old. So he would kind of like go away and then come back and then go away and come back. And it was really difficult to then try and do that as well, because I didn't want Tyler growing up seeing both her
Mm.
parents being away so much. So yeah, so then I made the difficult decision to give it up, and it was really painful. I just kind of couldn't listen to music for a while, and
Oh.
yeah, it was really, really painful. But in the end, I kind of got really into running. That kind of, I'm one of those people, I have to have something to work on. Like, I
Yeah.
just have to have a project. And so I decided that I was going to get fit and healthy for the first time ever, and I really dedicated myself to learning how to run. But I've been a smoker for like many, many, many years, so that was obviously an issue. Like, I gave up smoking when I found out I was pregnant, and then I did go back to smoking like one cigarette a day after I had her. I think it was like that 5 minutes of peace, like of just not having the baby screaming in your face. But and then I was just like, look, I can't do this. Like, I need to dedicate myself. And then I started looking into food and like the way that food works with the body. And I just started doing like a load of research into why we eat certain things, why certain foods are good for us, and all of that sort of thing. And that's kind of where my journey with Bexfast really started, because it was like finding out about nutrition and you know cutting out refined sugar and like how that
Mm.
affected my energy. And I just found I was like my own experiment. I was just like very intrigued by the whole thing, and then realizing that once I changed my diet from eating cake and garlic bread and all this stuff like every day to eating like a whole food diet, just how different I felt, and how my
Yeah.
moods were more stable, and how I felt differently about the world, and about myself and all of these things. And I just found it was so interesting and amazing that I'd lived all of these years without really knowing any of this stuff.
Yeah, because being a mum, I mean, it takes such a toll on your well-being in general.
Mm,
So, if you're not eating right during that time, whether you're pregnant or, a new mum, it
mm,
can really have a massive effect on you. So, everything you got to do, you've got to make sure you're giving yourself the best. So,
mm,
I'd love to just go back a little bit. Was it really hard for you to I know that you felt like the decision wasn't tough in terms of you felt found fulfillment being a mum, but
mm.
was it hard making that decision after you get into that point of like feeling, oh, this is exactly what I've been working for so long, and then I can't actually take it because I'm pregnant? How was that?
It kind of made me laugh because I feel like this is the way the world works. It's like in my life, like, like if I ever got to a point where something seemed like it was working out, then suddenly it would go. And I always just kind of thought that was my luck. I was like, oh, of course, this would happen now. And but I was also really excited, even though I was quite young, and even though we'd only been together for like a year, it was still quite exciting, and I felt like suddenly found this like extra purpose. But yeah, stepping away from music because I genuinely love it. Like I love music. I feel like it's just such a part of who I am, who I was. My whole identity was in it at that time as well. Everyone was like, you're the girl that's going to make it, you're the one. I remember
Uh,
being even like, like 15, 16. I got offered the place in my college before they'd interviewed anyone else. They said like, it's non-negotiable. You're on the course. And, I was just so, I mean, I got to do incredible things, like really, really
mm,
incredible things with it. It's just one of those things like saying yes. I was never comfortable being on stage. I was so nervous, like really, really nervous all of the time. But I'm just one of those people, it's like, I kind of just force myself to do things because I know that afterwards I'm going to be really glad I did it.
but it sounds like you're a natural performer then, because the way you show up on Instagram is amazing. So do you
Mm.
feel that's helped you in terms of marketing your business?
Absolutely. Yeah, I had years of practice of like just I feel like I'm very like I love to talk to people as well. I'm very interested in people and human behavior as well, and just building a story. I guess that was where it really grew for me, was like I wrote songs, and I knew how to word something in a way that could appeal to somebody in like the way that I wanted them to feel about it. It's not like tricking them, but like there's so many different ways you can say something. And I thought it was really interesting that if I said something one way, it might provoke a different reaction to if I said it another way. And I feel like that's the whole deal with Instagram, is like you can tell a story. I mean, you can just post a picture and a caption and, be done with it. But I spend a lot of time not really thinking about it, but like when I'm writing, like my husband and my daughter say, like, I'm in my zone. Like I really love to write because I just feel like the thing that I hate about social media is all the fake stuff. And I feel like we're in a really good place where actually a lot of that is kind of falling away now. I think because we want reality now. We want to
Mm,
see the ups and downs and the real story behind it, the real people behind things. Whereas like Instagram a year, 2 years, 5 years ago was like all these perfect lives, and everyone pretending that they live in Notting Hill, standing outside those beautiful houses and leaning up against fancy cars. And it's like, I hate that. Like I genuinely hate people pretending that something is so much better than it is, because I love the story. I love the
mm,
person. And I feel like I want people to know me. I love it when I'm out and people come up to me and they're like, "Oh gosh, you're Bexfast or whatever." Or often they don't even say that. They're like, "I just want to say, like, I really love like what you do and how honest you are about things." And I'm like, that means so much to me because that's a real connection. Do you know what I mean? That meant
mm.
something to that person when they read it, because it meant something to me when I was writing it as well. And I would just so much rather people see me for the person that I am, with all my faults and all the things that I'm good at, and and just be like, well, that's Bex, I know her, because then they trust you, and then they
Mm,
know that you're not going to try and sell them a gimmick, or whatever. Like anything that I promote, anything that I talk about is something that's really important to me, and there's a reason behind that. It's either changed my health, or it's I've seen the effects of it in certain ways. And I just think building those relationships you can't put a value on that. Like, you could
Mm,
have a really small following, but if your following feels like that about the things you say, then the engagement will be really good. And I think that's where we're at now, is where it's like the storytelling and the personal relationships, and the fact that people can talk to you is, it's just so valuable. It's not like trying to set yourself up as a celebrity. I really just, that whole influencer thing, it's just not me. Like, I know it works for some people, and I know some people
yeah.
really strive to be an influencer, but I just feel like you could really have a lot of influence with people if you were just focusing on being passionate about something and being really,
Yeah, being truthful and laying it on the line the way you do. It's amazing.
definitely. Yeah, oh, thank you.
I'm interested. Your Bexfast pots are vegan. When was it that you went vegan?
I about 6 years ago now. So I started my health journey before ever planning to go vegan. I really loved meat and eggs, and my friends always laugh still because they're like, "I can't believe, you went vegan and whatever." Because I would have, I used to think, and this is really, it's going to sound really stupid, but I used to think that vegans were like the people that waited for things to drop off the tree before they eat. I was like, why would you just like not want to eat meat and eggs? But I got severely ill quite a while ago now, and my legs didn't work properly, my arms didn't work properly. I couldn't put full sentences together. I was tired all of the time. I couldn't get dressed without, you know, dozing off, and it was really, really, really difficult. My husband was still away quite a lot at this point, and it was hard because I'm trying to like pick up my daughter or play with her, and I'm just falling asleep on the sofa, and nobody could figure out what had gone wrong. I was actually at the healthiest that I'd ever been. I was running insane amounts. I was, body weight exercises, I was doing it all. And although I feel like I was probably a little bit restrictive with my diet, I'd become quite obsessed with like being as small as I possibly could. And it was,
Mm,
there's definitely two sides to that body positive kind of fitness and health industry. But I feel like I'm lucky that I've come through both waves of it. But I'd pushed my body too far, and I don't know whether that had an effect on me. That was one of the factors in me getting so ill. But it turned out that I had like chronic fatigue, and they kept saying, "Oh, it might just be a vitamin D deficiency," and they gave me loads and loads of vitamin D, like really ridiculously high doses of it. It didn't change anything. My mum was like, "Oh, it's because you're not eating red meat anymore," and she, like force fed me loads of red meat. That didn't change anything. I tried upping my protein. I tried, getting all the nutrients in I could, and nothing changed. And I used to work in a bar, and I had like thrown a tray of beers over this guy because my arms had just stopped working like midway through.
wow.
So it was really frustrating as well, because in my head I know what I want my body to do, and it just wasn't doing it. And I was talking about this. My Instagram was very small at that point, but I was like posting little bits about like not feeling so great and not being able to run and feeling really tired. And people started messaging me saying, "Oh, like, I've got ME, chronic fatigue. It sounds like you've got what I've got. I've had to give up my job. I've had to stop doing this." And I was like, "Oh my god, that is like the most terrifying thing. I've just got to this point in my life where I'm so active and I'm really enjoying it, and it's really something that." It makes me feel amazing. And then the thought of that all going away and not being able to look after my daughter by myself, or all of these things, it was like terrifying. So the last doctor I saw, he was just kind of like, "Look, this might be you forever. Like, you're gonna go home and you're going to go for a run." And I was like, "Look, my legs are not working. I can't feel like from my thigh to my knee, and then like parts of my calves. I couldn't feel my ankles or like the soles of my feet. It was just like, how can I go for a run?" And he said, "Look, well, it's either you go home and you try and get back to your normal life, or you're going to lay on your sofa for the next 6 months, and you're going to come back and say nothing's changed. And all I'm going to be able to prescribe you is a simple workout routine that is going to frustrate you so much because you've been used to being so active, and then your muscles are going to deteriorate, and your energy levels are going to be so low." And so that was like, I was a bit blown away by it, and I thought, "Oh, he's being ridiculous." But I went home and I got ready for this run, and I fell asleep like at least twice while I was putting on my clothes. And it was ridiculous because I couldn't even feel my legs. So I was running. I started to run and I fell over a few times, and then I was crying because it was just so frustrating. And I'm very determined though. And I'm like, okay, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to prove him wrong. And I'm going to go back there and I'm going to say that was the most ridiculous thing you've ever told me to do. But once I got home, as frustrating as it had been, as much as I'd fallen over, and as emotional as that had been, it was like a whole new lease on my life, because I was like, when my body said no, I said yes. Like mentally, I was so much stronger. And I think that's one of the disciplines that you learn with like running and long distance running and training your body, is that discipline is like when your body is saying I'm tired, when your muscles are saying no more, you're like 2 more reps, 5 more reps. You know,
Mm.
when I was running really long distances, you'd get to the point where your legs are like just wanting stuff, and I'm like, can I take one more step? If I can take one more step, then I can take another one. And it's just that discipline in your head. And I think that's why I can work so hard on the business now, is because I learned
Mm.
that, like, when you're tired and when you want to stop, and when things feel like really hard, like too hard, and you don't know how you're going to do it, it's like, can I take one more step? Can I do one thing that's going to better my day or my life, or the business or whatever? And so I think for me that was invaluable. That was just like the most amazing thing that could happen. So yeah, and I'm always say I'm really thankful that I got so ill in the first place, because, sorry, this is a really long tangent for me going vegan, but I just felt like the story needed to be told. But yeah, so in the end, the thing that I found online was that a lot of people that were living normal lives, where they were like still out being able to look after their kids or go running, or whatever, they were all plant-based. And so I thought I'd give it a go. And I was sure I was going to hate it. I thought it's not going to work, but at least I can tick it off and say that I've done
Mm.
it. And so I gave it a month, and I started to feel like more energy than I'd felt in ages. And then I gave it 2 months, and I could, it wasn't like a quick recovery. It wasn't like an overnight miracle
Mm.
success, but I could definitely feel the changes. And it was exciting that the thought that this might actually give me back my freedom, or at least part of my freedom. And so yeah, I just carried on, and it's been like 6 years now, and I've never felt better. My skin is always super clear, my energy levels are always up. You never get that feeling after you've eaten, that lethargic kind of feeling.
Mm.
And my daughter's vegan. She's been vegan since she was about 3. And she is, everyone who meets her, I did worry that people were going to be like, oh, bringing up a child vegan, blah, blah. But when they meet her, they're like, oh my gosh, like, she is full energy, full brains,
Not lacking in anything.
yeah, she's just incredible. So nobody's ever really questioned it, which is great.
That is an amazing story. And so it's interesting how all of these things in your life has kind of fed into how you're running your business. So I'd love to go into that, of like you say about having that that work ethic and just one more step and everything. Now, I followed you and you get up. Well, I don't know if that's the case right now, but
No.
when you're working in the kitchen, you're getting up at 5 a.m.
Mhm.
and going to work, and you work really long hours. Like, what has that been like for you? Because you've had a lot of challenges over the time. Can you talk about the things that you've had to sacrifice and the things you've had to do to get your business up and running?
Yeah, so I mean, it's been the most insane last couple of years. I think, had I not gone through those things, I definitely wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now. So I can't even think where to start. Like, we did the crowdfunding, because the business was at home for like 3.5 to 4 years, and then we did the crowdfunding campaign to move the business out of my house into a kitchen, get some staff. But we tested it, we knew people loved the product, and people were just always like, when can I get them here, when can I get them there? And I was like, all right, we're going to do it. So the first challenge, I'm trying to think, like, stock not arriving when you really need it, pallets of glass smashing. Then we had the whole problem with a courier company. I keep shaming them, and I'm just like, do you know what? I'm not going to keep putting them through it, because I get so many messages about them, like, oh, were they really that bad? But we lost an incredible amount of money from using this courier service, from them not delivering the packages one day. I think it was the first time we'd made like maybe like 70 to 100 packages, and which is, you know, anything from, I mean, the standard order is about 6 to 7 pots. So if you've got 75 to 100 packages, you know, it's hundreds and hundreds of pots. And I'd spoke to the driver and he said, you know, I'm going to be there a little bit late. If you need to go, leave the boxes outside and I'll come and get them. And so I did, and it torrentially rained that night, and we got there at like 6 a.m. in the morning, and all of the packages were still outside, and all of
Oh,
the boxes were ruined. All the pots were ruined because they've been set outside all night, and we have to
oh
keep them
no.
cold and whatever. And yeah, it was just an absolute nightmare. So we had to throw away all those boxes, and all the, I think the pots were okay actually with that order because they had the ice packs and everything in there. But we then, it took, so we do like next day delivery to get them there within 24 hours. So then obviously we had to, like, I think we had to sell those pots to people that could pick them up and then remake the entire lot, which obviously cost me double the money.
Mm.
um there was another time where they'd sent a driver and he was literally, bearing in mind they have fragile written across the whole of the package, was picking them up and throwing them into the van in front of me. Like, I mean, they were everywhere. And so I got on the van and I said to him, you are not taking any more of my stuff. I said, you can rip up my contract. Like, this is not happening. So I got on the on the van and he was like, get off, on the phone to people. And I said, grab my phone, to one of the girls. I said, get my phone. And I videoed the whole lot inside the van, like where they'd all been tossed. And then I took all of them off and I said, you're not taking any more of my packages. And then that was like another whole load of packages that got ruined because, you know, we couldn't then get them out within 24 hours, because they all had to be, you know, they had to go out with another courier service the next day. So we had to then set up like a whole new courier contract with an untried, untested courier service. Just so many things, like a pallet of jars that was, I'd ordered 3 pallets of jars because I was like, every time they don't turn up, I'm like kicking myself, like, oh, I shouldn't have done, you know, I should have ordered them earlier, or, you know, whatever. But you trust
Mm.
that they're going to do it, especially when you're paying like an extra, you know, 50 quid for a next day delivery or whatever. And this particular time we'd ordered 3 pallets of jars. The first one, I think, got smashed, like the entire pallet. Then the second one had been held at a port somewhere in the other end of the country. And then something else had happened to the third one. I can't remember. They just couldn't get it to us. And it was just like, how many things can go wrong? Like, really? But I mean, it was literally, and then the biggest thing that happened last year was that I had taken some really bad business advice when I moved into my first kitchen. And they'd given me a set of numbers that I was meant to be achieving each month, which seemed big for me at the time, but it's like so minimal to what we do now. But I said, okay, right, we can get there. And he told me to take on a certain amount of staff and that I shouldn't be doing any work. And I was like, that doesn't really seem right, considering I've been doing it all on my own for the last, you know, 3 or 4 years. I
Mm.
just need people to help me now do it. Anyway, it was just really, really bad advice. And the numbers that he'd given me, bear in mind, he'd asked me to pay him to be his mentor as well. But the numbers that he'd given me absolutely weren't right. And so after those first 3 months of like doing it, I was like, why do we not have money in the bank? Why
Mm.
is this not working out? Because I've done what he's told me to do. And we suddenly realized that he hadn't really taken a lot of things into consideration, and the numbers were completely wrong. And so we were like, what are we going to do? It's like, either we do a massive upscale like without any preparation, or we're going to have to close. And I was like, I have come too far, I have been through too much to like close now. Like, we're going to go down fighting, and if that's how it goes, you know, at least I'll know that we've done everything that we can. So
Mm.
we suddenly upscaled, and it was like 0 to 1 million in like,
What did that look like then? You say you upscaled. Was it? It sounds like you just pressed a button and you upscaled your business. But like, what did that look like to
it
get?
basically was. So, like, my husband is a bit of a genius, and he had just decided he likes to learn things, and he gets very obsessed about things. And he, not last Christmas, the Christmas before, he decided he was going to like start learning about Facebook ads and how to run them properly and efficiently, and how to grow and scale a company. Now, at this point, he'd never wanted to be a part of Bexfast. Like, we'd always said that would never be a good idea. We
Mm.
already work so much, and then to work together on so it would just be so difficult. But so he'd already just learned, just for his own kind of knowledge and like whatever. And so he was like, look, we've got money left in the bank, like it's not much, but like, why don't we try doing these Facebook ads, and I can see that if what I've learned is like correct. And so he made these ads. I strung together a load of stories that people had put up on the Instagram of them with their pots and whatever, and I'd saved them all. I save all the comments, I save all the videos, because it just makes me feel so
Mm.
amazing, especially when you're going through like a really hard patch, and then you look through your phone and you're like, no, people love what I do. This is what why it's worth fighting for all of the time. And so we did it, but we weren't prepared for how quickly it would change things, because he'd gone into the depths of like Facebook and how to make it work. It was scary how quick it all kind of happened. And this
Mm.
video that I'd spent 2 hours like maybe piecing it together and putting some music on it and whatever. And we put it out there and we were like, okay, let's just see what happens. And then it was mental. I mean, we had so many orders. And then at the same time, there had been like an incredible heat wave. So not only were this courier company ruining loads of packages, not delivering them properly and whatever, we then had our first 100 package week. And it was like the day we sent them was the hottest day of the year last year. And they all got completely ruined. Like every
Oh
single
no.
package arrived. And I think we've spent the money on the actual shipping then as well. And it's not cheap to ship next day. So we've not only spent the money on the staff, the boxes, the ice packs, the insulation, the jars, the labels, everything. We've also paid the shipping, and every single one of those 100 orders was ruined. And so we had to resend them. So then that sent us into this, like, we got into this backlog. But at that point, we had so many orders coming in. I mean, I don't know if you've got like a Shopify account, but it goes cha-ching every time you get a sale, which is so satisfying when you're getting like the odd sale here and there. But when it is literally cha-ching, 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 and it is terrifying, because you're like, I don't know how we're going to do this. But we couldn't afford to get more staff because we'd lost all of this money. So we'd gone from having like all the money up front, like when you get the sale, you get the
Mm.
money, then you spend it on the stock and whatever. We were now in like a deficit. So we were just like, oh my God, we've just got to make it work. And so the whole of last summer, I think that there was not one day of the summer holidays that I wasn't working. But we also worked like 24-hour shifts. We did, like, my husband did like a 36-hour shift, like, and he'd never been involved with Bexfast before, but he was like, we have to, like, we just have to do it crazy. There were
Mm.
times I was going in for like 8 hours, coming home having a 1 hour sleep, going back to work for 12 hours, coming home having a 2 hour sleep. And it was awful. Like, honestly, it was horrendous. But I knew that if we could just claw it back, that it was going to be something phenomenal. And obviously that story, as we were telling it, like, people are watching this, oh my God, are they going to make it? Oh my God. We had people, I had a woman that I'd met once because she'd come to a workshop that I did like years ago at Westfield. And she was like, I'm coming over, I'm going to label all your jars for you. And I was like, at this point, I'm just crying. I'm going into work crying, and then trying to put on a brave face for my staff. The staff were working insane hours as well. And, we're only ever being like, we're going to do this. We are going to make this happen. And I was like, I'm so thankful for them, honestly. Like, they are just so badass. And they were like, we're going to make this work. Even when it looked, I mean, honestly, there were times when it was like, there's no way this is going to happen. Like, there weren't even enough ice packs frozen for it to happen. And somehow it would just work out, because everybody was just like, no, we're going to do it. And it took us a while to get out of that backlog. And obviously we had over 700 orders outstanding. And so you've then got 700 people emailing you, and then you're trying to reply to them, and you've got all of this stuff going on. Instagram messages, Facebook messages, people writing bad reviews on Facebook because they haven't had their pots for like 3 weeks. It was just insane. But we managed to claw it back, and it was very much down to customer service. Like,
Mm.
definitely the customer service saved it, and the fact that it was so transparent on Instagram. I
Mm.
feel like because people could see how hard we were working, they knew that it was worth the wait. And the good thing was, because the product is so good, like once they got it, they were like, it was worth waiting for. But then the
Mm.
problem was they started ordering again. And so it was like this insane cycle of like, oh, we're now going to have to wait like another month for your pots or whatever, because we hadn't come out of that cycle. But
Well, that sounds like a great problem to have more orders coming in.
it was probably the most awful time of my life, to be honest. And with my illness as well, because stress is like my real trigger. And
Mm.
how stressful. I mean, honestly, people were seeing me and they were coming in like, Beck, how's it going? And I'm just there crying, like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to get out of this. But because everyone, and it was definitely it was not a me thing. It was my husband giving up 3 months of his life to come on board and help sort it
Mm.
all out. It was all of the staff being like, no, like this is too good. Like, we know that it works. Like, we know that people love what we do. We cannot fail now. Like, we've been through too much. Just not being prepared is so terrifying, and not
Yeah.
knowing what to expect. And I would never want to go through that again. But then I'm also really thankful for it now, because when
Mm.
the pandemic hit, I was so cool. I was like, okay, so we've got like half the staff, right? That's it. I know how to handle this. We'll email everyone and just say, look, it's going to take a bit longer. And I know it wasn't stressful this time around, like having to close. It was like, okay, I know how to
Yeah.
to kind of not solve the situation, because it's definitely not solved, but I know how to.
Navigate it.
Yeah,
Yeah. So you're actually closed at the moment, kitchen
yeah.
closed. How is that for you? Because you have been working, forgive me, working like a dog for the last couple of
Mm.
years, getting up at 5 a.m. Have you had some more lions recently?
Oh my gosh, like I'm getting up. Well, I went through the first kind of 3 weeks that I was off. It felt like a holiday. So it was just like I was waking up at 9 o'clock, hours like I would normally have done like at least a third of my work day at that point. And it's been amazing and quite difficult at the same time, because going from a million miles an hour to nothing very quickly. Um,
But also having a business that's not running, I mean, that must be
yeah.
affecting you. How is that for you?
Well, we have a lot of outstanding orders. The worst thing was it was our highest grossing month ever as well. And the annoying thing is like what I said about getting offered the record deals and then finding out I was pregnant. It was like everything after today will be profit, because we've made enough to like pay everything off, pay back some of the loan and this, that, and the other, everything after today. And then that was the day we had to close. And I was like, damn it,
No.
whatever. But it's been difficult. And but we have the most incredible community. So
Mm.
we have a very large number of outstanding orders, but I'm going to say 90% of those have emailed and said, I am happy to wait until you come back. And so we've been really fortunate that we've had that, because we've had to do some refunds, but we weren't expecting to stop. So we've reinvested in like all the stock. Like, we've got a full pallet of jars. We've got all the, hundreds and hundreds of liters of milk. We've got all the ingredients and everything. So we're kind of like set up and ready to go as soon as it's safe. But the staff kind of went into isolation one by one. And then we had a member of staff that was in New York when that was happening. So when he came back, I was like, you can't really come back to work for like 7 days or whatever it was at that point. And then he decided to isolate after that as well. So we were just kind of like, oh my God. And at this point, I don't know if you know, but like we had to move kitchens very
Mm.
quickly. It was just a nightmare. Like, that was another one of the big things that happened, is like we were in this kitchen for January and February, and we were meant to have only been in that one for January and then moved into this one that was going to be our home for like the next 6 months. But something had happened and they weren't quite ready. So we'd been able to stay at this other temporary kitchen for a little bit longer. And then the next week, we were meant to be moving into that kitchen finally. It was like, okay, it's done now. We're going to move in. And on the Tuesday, we were meant to move in the following Thursday on the next week. And on the Tuesday, the week before, they were like, oh, there's something wrong with the pipes. We're not going to be able to move in. But the person who's moving into the temporary kitchen still needs to move in on the days said. And so I was like, oh my God, what do you mean? Like, we've got a full operation going here, and we're like super, and we were really on top of our orders as well. People were getting them within like 3 days. It was like the best we've ever done. And then he was like, yeah, and you need to move out by the weekend. So it was Tuesday. I had to find
Ah,
another kitchen by Friday so that we could move over the weekend. And I've become very good at critical management, like crisis management. It was like, okay, so my brain was like, right, well, we've got to sort it out, it has to happen. Got on the phone to loads of people, and we got there was a kitchen that was just around the corner from us, but it was a complete, like, they were doing a complete renovation, but they were like, look, if you are desperate, we can clear an area for you, you can have that. And then somebody that I knew from Westfield, who's been like a massive supporter of her, I won like Entrepreneur of the Year in 2017 with Westfield, and they were like, look, we've got this restaurant that's not being used, you can have the kitchen for the next 3 weeks for free. And I was like, oh my gosh, are you
oh,
insane? But there's so much paperwork and everything with moving somewhere like Westfield. So I had to do with that. So we had to move into the kitchen around the corner for 3 days. Then we moved into
oh,
Westfield. And then that was when lockdown happened as well. So then I had like 2 members of staff. And then I had 1 member of staff. And then I was like, look, this is just too ridiculous. And stock was so hard to get hold of as well. Like we couldn't get hold of
mm,
oats, like, because we have to get them in such big quantities. We couldn't get hold of oats. We couldn't get hold of like half the stuff we needed. So I just said, look, I could have made it happen at some point. I was going to hire a load of people that have been furloughed from their jobs, because I thought at least if we can stay open, then at least we can give jobs to people that are not going to have an income any other way. But once everything was so hard to get hold of, we were just kind of like, there's no point. I mean, I could just continue to make this stressful, or I can take some time, reevaluate the whole business. And I think actually what this time has taught me is that I really like being at home, and it's something that I haven't had for the last few years, and it's something I've really missed, is just being at home. And because we've always had little projects, and my husband been away for so much when Tyler was little, and this is the first time we've really spent in the house together.
mm,
Obviously we're still working and stuff, but it's just so nice. And so I really want to use this time to create a much healthier work system, and to potentially take myself out of the day-to-day running slightly. I would still be very heavily involved, but there is an opportunity on the table at the moment that we're just about to sign a non-disclosure for, so we can start talking numbers. But I don't know whether it's something that will work out, but if it does, it will allow me
mm.
some space to really kind of create the Bexfast that maybe would have been better to to have done in the beginning. Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you what's next for you because, I mean, you do hand make all your pots. I mean, it's fascinating to hear that you spent for the first 3 or 4 years making them from home. So,
Mm.
how what was the journey from getting it from, like, a small home kitchen, making them, to, having a multi, number of people working on your team and having all that to do?
Lots and lots of hard work. It's been well, I started by selling them at my friend's boot camp. I was making them just for myself at home. This was never meant to be a business, which is why it's been so messy throughout, because I
Mm,
didn't have any like business training. It was just the fact that people were saying, I love what you're doing, can I get it? And as I was saying, like with the performing, and with everything that I did when I was younger, I just put myself in that situation where I'm like, I have no idea what I'm doing, but I'm just going to say yes, and then if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. And so I was making them and selling them at this boot camp on a Saturday morning on Clapham Common. And it just became like really buzzing. It was really weird because they were in like all different size jars. So you'd be paying the same amount of money, but you might get a jam jar, or you might get like a bolognese sauce jar. Like, you don't know what you're getting. And they were all different flavors. They had no labels. It was really just a concept. But people loved them. And after a while of selling them at the boot camp and then just putting it on my Instagram, just saying like where we were going to be and whatever, people started showing up from Instagram on the Saturday morning, like 8 a.m., to come and get them. And I used to go from that boot camp, which was, I think we got there at like 7:30, 8 till 9. I'd run to work, which I used to work in a bar in Clapham. So then I'd run to work or get the bus, and then I would work a shift until till 2 p.m. And then I would go home, and I would do all of the other stuff, like obviously be with Tyler, be here, and then throughout the nights I used to make the pots. So once we'd done that and I realized that people wanted them, I then started offering it to people at underground stations all across London. So I think we did zones 1 to 4, and I said, look, if you want some pots, email me. It wasn't, there was like no website, there was nothing. It was just like, email me and tell me what you want and which station you're closest to, and then I'd have a cut-off point. So then that was Saturday. So then I would do the boot camp, go to work, and then I'd go and deliver these pots.
Wow.
um and then I took on another job. I was working in solicitors for a little while as well. And so I had like all these jobs, but I was really passionate about it. So I was like making the pots through the night, getting Tyler ready for school, taking her to school. You know, on a Wednesday, I would go and do like office runs. So it would be more like Holborn and those kind of areas. And then on the weekends, I would go, and it was so far stretched. I mean, it'd be like in White City, and then it'd be somewhere in like near South London, then it'd be like West London and East London, and it was really insane. They were all in a suitcase, honestly, and it was so heavy as well. Like my muscles were like incredible at that point. But so yeah, so it was just a lot of graft, and after a while, I realized that you know, there was some magic in what I was doing, and I think because people had seen it from it being a concept to get this name. The whole reason with the name as well is that I used to hashtag my recipes that I used to do on my Instagram as breakfast by
Uh-huh.
Bex. And then my friend was like, you have to call it Bexfast. And so then I started hashtagging it Bexfast, and I just feel like people just suddenly felt like it was a real
Mm.
thing. And it was kind of like the beginning of the whole blogger era as well, like the Instagram kind of blogger recipe, kind of home chef sort of thing. So it was really kind of at the right time, and it was in the glass jars. It was before the whole sustainability thing came in, and it was vegan, and it was before the whole wave of vegan food was coming through. So yeah, so then I entered this competition that somebody just sent me the link for, and it was this Entrepreneur of the Year with Westfield and Levi Roots. And I totally didn't expect to hear back from them, because it was such a small business that I was doing every single
Mm.
part of. And we'd been selling them in a few independent health shops as well. So I would like deliver them to the people at tube stations, and then I'd go and drop them off at the shops or whatever. And then at this point, all the labels were handwritten as well, because there was no budget for getting real labels, and so that took forever as well, writing all the labels. But like people would turn up at the shops and wait for me as well, like to arrive, and then they would all be bought before they even reached the shelves. It was I didn't really understand it. It was almost kind of like, wow, you know, like just I don't understand what's going on,
Mm.
but it's obviously working. And then I did this competition, and I ended up winning it, even though I bumbled around like on the stage, going, because I'm quite a nervous public speaker as well. So like anything on a stage, I get quite nervous, and I kind of bumbled around, and I said, you know what, let me put all this paperwork and all of this stuff down, and let me just tell you my story about what I've been doing and whatever. And yeah, so I won it, and then we had a pop up in Westfield. They gave us a space in Westfield for January 2018 for the whole month. And so then I did that, and I had like a member of staff for that. Um, and then in the February, I was like, look, this, I don't want to go back to just doing these runs around the tube stations. It was becoming too much for
Mm.
me to do anyway. So I said, look, I'm going to do a website. And so I opened a website, and we started sending them across the UK in these boxes. And so at this point, making the posts in the night, doing the school run, and then packaging them up through the day.
Mm.
And for the courier to come and pick them up before the school run, and then I'd go back, go get her, and then it was just, you know, it was just nonstop the entire time. But it grew and grew and grew, and it got to the point where I was just like, I can't do this all
Mm.
anymore, and the potential is so great. Like if I kept it at this level, which I could have done, but
It wasn't sustainable for you.
it wasn't sustainable for me. And I knew that, like, you know, so many more people wanted them. And so yeah, so then we were just like, well, how do I get it out of my house? Like, how is that even possible with like no budget, no money, like to really back? Because I reinvested everything throughout. Like I never paid myself a wage, and that was why it was able to grow steadily throughout. There was never been a time of regression. It has only ever grown and grown and grown. And so I said, all right, well, let's try a crowdfunding campaign. And I spoke to a few people that I knew, and I just thought, you know what? let's do it. But we went back and forth on the number quite a while, because I was like, £20,000 sounds like such a huge amount of money. And although I had a very strong like Instagram community, like
Mm.
£20,000 just seemed like a ridiculous amount of money to be able to raise. And that was like a whole thing in itself, because I don't know if you've ever done crowdfunding, but it's so stressful. It's like it takes over your entire life for the whole month that you're doing it, and before that as well, because you want to plan it properly. But we raised over £23,000 in the end, which was insane,
Mm.
and then that gave us the money to then move into this kitchen. But taking the bad advice and all of that, I lost money on that, but
It's got you to where you are today.
100%. And I really believe that, trying testing times are the things that teach you the most about who you are, your
Mm.
tenacity, like what you're capable of. You have to run a business, and you have to be so willing to put your whole life into it,
Mm.
and make it your life. Because obviously I wasn't not being a mom, and I wasn't not being a friend, and all of these things. You just have to shape your life around it. And so yeah, so then we grew, and then we got some staff. And then once all that stuff happened last year, and we knew that we had to really upscale, we took on more staff, and just made it work. But I never paid myself. Like, it would pay the bills, it would pay for the very bare minimum. But it was only recently that I've started taking a wage. So
Wow.
again, it's sacrifice. It is definitely sacrifice, dedication, and working through all the problems, and just asking a lot of advice. I constantly ask people who I know who are in maybe a slightly higher position than me, or have been through something similar. And it's just, I never want to feel like I know it all, because I think that's a very scary situation to be in, where you feel like you're at the top of your game. I just think I
Mm.
always want to be slightly under and striving for that next level.
Yeah. So if there's anyone listening here who is making something at home that feels like it's has the potential to become a business, what advice would you give them?
Well, I would say start with what you have. I think half the time the reason that people don't start something is because they feel like it's scary and it's massive, and they might not have the means to start. And had I thought this was going to be a business, I might not have just started by selling them to my friends or whatever. So I would just say start small, start with where, and be okay with being small. I think the problem is, you see these brands on Instagram, and you might not have seen what got them to where they are, or the investment they've had. They might have paid for followers, or whatever. And it can seem like, if you have 300 followers and maybe like one or two customers, you might feel like inferior or whatever. But it's just being brave enough to start, and believing in your ideas. And I always say that probably one of the reasons that Bexfast did so well as well is because it was really built on my ethics. And I was offered, you know, money and expertise with somebody who's done really really well in business. And but he wanted me to use plastic, and this was back before people were really kind of environmentally
Mm.
as aware as we are now. And I just knew in my heart that I didn't want to get to my deathbed and know that there was all this plastic that still existed in the world that was because of me. And so I said to him, if that's what I would need to do to be able to work with you, then I'm sorry, but I'm not interested. And I really think that those key things, because they were so much a part of like my passion and who I am as a person, they then built this story, and they helped to cement the foundation of what Bexfast is. And I feel like if you have whatever industry you're in, whether it's like interiors and you have a specific art style, or like, or color scheme, but it might not be the done
Mm.
thing at that time. But if you're really passionate about it, like really stick to it, and really kind of, I mean, definitely grow, definitely change as and when you need to, and build and whatever. But I really think like your ideas are what is getting you started and what people are interested in. So don't then try to do what somebody else
Mm.
is doing, because you'll lose that magic and that spark. So yeah, start small, be you, be authentic. Don't try and seem like this big Instagram star if you're just starting out. I just think people see through it. And I think more than ever, especially going through this coronavirus, I really feel like the way that people are shopping and the types of things that people are buying now, because we've got the time to stop and think about what we really want to spend our money on. And if money's limited, would I rather buy something of quality, of value, over, you know, something that in 3 months' time I'm not even going to look at, or I'm not even going to wear, or whatever. So yeah, just bringing something of value to people and showing them why it's valuable to them, and just creating that narrative of why their life will be enhanced by having your product, your service, or whatever in their life. Authenticity is the big key, I think, and telling a story. And it doesn't have to be like super wordy or whatever, but just keeping people in the know, keeping people engaged. Even when you feel, and then like I struggle with this sometimes, because I like to talk about things that are happening, or where I'm at, things that we're doing, how we're progressing, or when things are going terribly wrong. I think that's a great side to show as well. To feel like you should be Instagramming more, but you don't really know what to say. It just, it doesn't have to be super intense. Like, just keep it light.
It doesn't have to be profound or life-changing. It's just
No.
sharing your journey, isn't it? Because that's what you've been doing. And I'm a big fan of yours. I'm a big fan of your pots as well. I actually had an order through not that long ago, and unfortunately I ate them all in one day because they were so amazing. um,
Do you know how often I get messages from people and they're like, I've just eaten 3, they arrived 10 minutes ago.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh my
Well, it's that whole thing
God.
of like the anticipation, and you get them and they're like, oh my God, there's these amazing flavors. How is it possible that you make these
Oh.
flavors, you know? So I would advise everybody. I mean, I can't wait for you to be able to get back up and running, but where can people find out more about you online? Where can they place orders when you're back in business?
Bexfast.com. So yeah, BEXFAST.com. That's where we are. And everything else is Bexfast. Bexfast on Instagram
Yeah.
as well.
Well, Bex, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, learning about your journey and your story and everything. I think people are gonna, if they've not found you before, they're gonna be in for a treat when they follow you on Instagram. So thanks ever so much for joining me
Thank
today.
you so much for having me.
You've been listening to the Business of Universal Kindness podcast with me, Sarah Henson. If you enjoyed the show, then please subscribe and leave a review so that more people can find it and join us on this journey. Find the show notes and more episodes of this podcast at sarahhenson.co.uk/podcast. Music is by Studios On It from Audio Jungle.